Hey everyone, market check-in here. So the bulls gapped up for a third time in a row. We now have 5 gap opens in a row, 2 to the downside, 3 to the upside. 3 gap up open is a bearish reversal pattern indicating that the bulls get exhausted to the upside, and it gets confirmed if we see a red day and a pullback begin tomorrow. But we're only going to be looking for a daily higher low to form if we do consolidate, because the bulls have certainly proved their point at this point. So we had, first things first, QQQ yesterday broke to a higher high. That increased the odds that SPY could do it. And as soon as we saw, we ended yesterday with the hourly consolidation. That was the first sign of, hey, maybe we're starting to pull back. And of course, with the higher open this morning breaking resistance first thing, the bulls said, not yet, we're not done. And we saw consolidation yet again in the afternoon at the end of the day, but not very significant. So the most important levels for me tomorrow, 281.11. And if 281.11 breaks, then we are seeing the start of consolidation, and we'll then be looking down at the low of the day, down at in the low 280s, and then 279 is the most important level for there. So on the hourly uptrend, we've got 278.29, 279, and 281.11. Most important 3 levels, and if we start to take them out, again, we zoom out to the daily and just look for a healthy daily higher low to form. We also saw oil with the V-shaped recovery breaking resistance. So one by one, key resistance breaks. And again, the weekly time frame, it's almost just a mini version. The weekly time frame, all out dump, V-shaped recovery, way stronger than what the most likely scenario would be in terms of how patterns have played out many times in the past. And in this instance, yet again, a V-shaped recovery and a break straight through resistance with a ton of strength as we head towards quadruple witching on Friday. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, check it out on Google, opportunity to learn. And essentially it's just a whole bunch of things expiring at once. IWM on the daily chart, still weaker. So the lower high for 158.78, extremely likely. It is the weakest bounce out of most of the names we're going to look at. And it did see continuation today, but again, not building a whole lot of confidence. The hourly chart consolidated most of the afternoon. First support is going to be 154.85, and the 4-hour tightening pattern is going to be likely to play out if we do drop back down towards the 154, 153 area. So not enough pullback just yet for us to say that our 4-hour lower high or our daily lower high has been set, but we're keeping an eye out for it. And if we break the low of today tomorrow, then that will have us say, yes, our daily lower high has been set. And now we look for the higher low compared to 150.61. Certainly still interested in what IWM ends up doing because, like I said, it did lead the way to the upside. It was the first major name that we look at to break its weekly resistance on the way up. So if we do see continued weakness from here, in my opinion, it might be a little bit of a precursor to be watching for some further S&P 500 weakness. QQQ lead bull, just continuation. Third gap up in a row, 4-hour RSI, including extended hours, getting up to the 70 mark. We look back historically. What do we do when it hits 70? 1, 2, 3 of the last times we've hit it, we've pulled back. Doesn't mean we can't break above it. We have broken above it for some quick little spikes a couple times, but clearly we see the price does not stay above 4-hour RSI above 70 very long at all. And here we are up at that level. So that's definitely something to be watching out for potential indication of consolidation. 177.08 is support, followed by 175.55 and 175.26 as the most important hourly levels to be watching on QQQ. XLF, lower high, very likely to form compared to the high of 26.94 because we're not up at those levels yet. And similar to IWM, but a little bit stronger. So again, watching for the equilibrium to play out. Here it is on the 4-hour for more detail, but I like it nice and clear and smooth on the hourly. If we lose the higher low, each candlestick pattern, if we break 26.32, the daily lower high will be set, and we'll look for the higher low compared to 25.68 support. XBI, very strong close today. So the XBI bounce has seen huge follow through. The bearish reaction from the FDA commissioner resigning. We've now bounced almost 8%. That's a 20-plus bounce in LABU in 4 days. After the gap filled, significant turnaround, all about 92.99. If we can't break that level, lower high is set. But just in terms of comparison, let's look at these 3 names who haven't broken to a higher high yet. So IWM is the weakest XLF, middle of the road, XBI, strongest. So we can say statistically, it is more likely that XBI will be likely to form a higher low and stay stronger and potentially see the bull break, or I should say compared to these other names. So the pullbacks that we're going to see are going to be directly reflected in how significant the bounce was, in my opinion. So I would expect healthier consolidation on XBI to maintain support than I would on IWM. So we'll be watching for what consolidation looks like on these three names that are still staying in the tightening ranges, while SPY, QQQ, and oil have already broken bullish. VIX right back down to our support of 1340, closed right at that level, gave it all back. We broke the daily lower highs. We never confirmed the daily trend change, and we're right back down to support at this point. And the bears are still in control. We just have no volatility as there's a lot of confidence in the market right now. And it's just a clear hourly downtrend to be watching still. Looks like we did get a little shift in momentum at the end of the day there, and then gave it all back. We had a 5-minute tightening pattern on SPY that broke bullish at the end of the day. There's the 5-minute tightening pattern breaking bearish on VIX at the end of the day. One thing I want to point out is oil and SPY and how significantly correlated they are, as we were watching on the way down in October and December, as they are on the way back up. The clue, in hindsight, was the oil bear break with no follow through in the V-shaped recovery. So that's something, along with the volume, that I just lock away in my memory banks and say, all right, I've now seen how that played out. Next time, I'm going to be better prepared because I did not act on that oil complete turnaround. And it was a clear signal in hindsight for SPY continuation to keep this bounce going. So that's worth noting. But what I want to point out here is the monthly time frame for oil. Now, we can look at this monthly time frame and say, what's the most likely scenario? And the most likely scenario is a monthly lower high is very likely to form. And just looking at how much 50% move would be here to get to the midway point from the high of 77 to the low of 42, we're talking $33, so $16 from the low. Just doing some rough math, 58. We're about the 50% point right now. So if we form a monthly lower high and consolidate on oil, we will have a monthly equilibrium to be watching. We are not going to be confident that our monthly lower high has been set unless we lose the weekly uptrend. Our new weekly high or low is 54.50. That's now the most important support level to me. If that breaks sometime in the next couple weeks, I will say our monthly lower high has been set and we'll look for a higher low to form compared to 42.34. There's no indication that that is going to happen, but that is something that I'm watching out for to look for the tightening monthly range. And we're going to get a tightening monthly range. It's just a question of can the bulls bounce to mid or upper 60s and favor themselves in this tightening range, or is it going to bounce to the 50% point? Fib traders would use the 61% point, which would be a little bit more upside. But again, this is not something I'm trading based off of. This is me getting prepared visually for the future in terms of what I feel is the most likely scenario and then looking for signs that that is playing out. So at this point, I'm not going to fight the oil bulls, but I am going to be watching for signs of weakness telling us that the monthly lower high has been set. We can definitely see further upside, and the reason for that is the lack of any resistance here. We're a bit extended on the daily time frame, just like SPY the last 4 days. The 4-hour RSI at this point is up over 70. We've gotten over 70 plenty of times before, but again, in the recent past, we don't stay above 70 on the 4-hour RSI for very long, looking back the last few months. Anything on the 4-hour time frame above 56.74 is a higher low, so bulls are not at risk of losing the 4-hour uptrend anytime soon. Bull reaction to the inventory report today. But again, longer perspective monthly time frame. Let's compare that to SPY. And let's compare it on the same chart first, and then we'll look at SPY on its own. But as I'm sure you can guess, it is extremely correlated. And if we make it a line chart, or a bar chart, I should say, we can see that the high was at the same point, the low was at the same point, and the bounce is following through to the same point. So SPY on the monthly time frame is still a possibility for an equilibrium. The only clear resistance at this point is the all-time high, but if we top out compared to 294 and lose the weekly uptrend We're then going to look for a monthly equilibrium to play out. So that's worth watching as a potential setup. And if oil loses its weekly uptrend and starts to see a monthly tightening range, we know that it's likely that SPY is going to do the same. We just established a new weekly higher low on SPY at 272.42. That is now the most important level for me, because if we lose that, the odds that our monthly lower high have been set, and we're going to consolidate back down into the mid to low 260s to form another monthly higher low and continue to tighten. That will be a scenario to be watching for. So again, not fighting the SPY bulls too hard here. Certainly looking for a pullback on the daily, but these long-term monthly tightening ranges as a possibility are certainly something I'm going to keep in mind. If they do play out this way, it's March. I would say we could consolidate and see a monthly range tighten up into the fall if that is how it plays out. That's what I'm watching. Natural gas. Solid bounce. Inventory report tomorrow is going to dictate whether we head down to test 2749 support or the double top of resistance. And we're right in the middle of that range. So this is a scenario I don't like for any entry of trades because stop loss levels are not clear, not nearby, and it's a gamble in terms of what the inventory report reaction is going to be. So this is the kind of scenario where I wait for the inventory report reaction and I see, are we going to test bullish resistance and look for the weekly trend change after brief consolidation? Well, it wouldn't even be a good clear weekly trend change in my opinion. We just need to watch this daily range and watch to see how the inventory report reacts and whether we test resistance or support from here. So that's where we stand overall. Again, just an example of using long-term timeframes, not intending to act on them anytime soon, but that's in the back of my mind. Whenever I'm looking at the daily and weekly setups, I'm going to constantly be wondering if it's going to fit into this monthly tightening pattern narrative that is developing for me personally. Hope you're well. Congrats to the bulls all week. Certainly very impressive. And we'll see if we get some healthy daily consolidation. We know higher lows are very likely on everybody due to the size of the bounce at this point. And Quad Witching Friday should be interesting. Have a good day. Do good things. We'll see you tomorrow. Chapter 8, story time. So we left off from the hot spring. And I actually heard about that hot spring. Like I said, you get these tips from just people in the same kind of traveler lifestyle. And that was from another group that I interacted with. They said, hey, you should check out these hot springs. And from there, I went to those hot springs. And then someone in those hot springs said, hey, you should check out Ice Lake Basin. And I'll point out Ice Lake Basin in one of the next chapters, not this one, but that was a highlight of the trip as well. So it was just this string of consistent recommendations that were on point. So I like this picture a lot. Really cool to be able to see the trail winding the whole way through the fields with the mountains in the background. These are just more spots coming down from Conundrum Hot Springs. And I believe I went to Telluride next, but had to skip my way across and stay in some other spots. And again, when you're in this expanse of a place surrounded by mountains that make you feel minuscule and you are by yourself, it is pretty powerful. Fresh creeks everywhere for fresh water. I drank from all these creeks with my little filter bag that I showed in chapter 1 and never got any kind of sickness, only felt perfect from the water that I was drinking. This spot stood out to me, so I had to take some pictures. This is just some BLM land, Bureau of Land Management. It's publicly owned. You can camp wherever you want off the road. So it's just dirt roads going through national forests or going through other big expanses of land. And they're nice to cut through rather than go on highways. If you want to take the longer scenic route, nice to drive through. Some of the places that I took my little Honda Civic are astounding that I did not get stuck. But literally driving under a mile an hour and just, navigating these big boulders and rocks on these trails, definitely at this age, I probably would not be risking it, but glad that I did because I never had any issues. But this spot specifically, camped here. This is near Vail and Breckenridge in Colorado. And again, just pulling off the road and camping, but ended up, nice little bunny dude, ended up having a lucid dream experience there. Well, partially lucid dream and partially a moose experience. That was my campsite right next to another creek running by. So I tented that night and I was sleeping and I woke up to the sound of something very big sniffing the back of my tent. And I could tell it was very big by the size of the breaths of the sniffing and rustling the back of my tent. So I'm awake and it's behind me. I'm facing the other way. I'm facing the entrance. So I just don't move. I make note of where my bear spray is and where my knife is just in case, but frozen to a degree and trying to, become aware of my surroundings and being alert and then just patiently waiting. And it was a full moon, or not a full moon, but a very bright moon. And slowly around the side of the tent, a giant moose walks in front of me. And then I saw another moose on the other side. And then I ended up seeing another smaller moose as well. And it's interesting to me because moose are fairly solitary animals. So the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking, am I dreaming? Because this whole trip I'm going through lucid dreaming experiences and I'm experimenting with it. And, this is a moment for me that was the most eerie, not eerie, that's the wrong word, but it was the longest it took me to determine whether I was dreaming or whether it was reality in my life. And I was literally sitting there, I'm doing reality checks. I'm saying, okay, I'm seeing this. It feels really magical and mystical. I don't exactly know what's going on. And I just was constantly doing these reality checks and pinching myself. And eventually they walked, they came up and they sniffed my fire and they walked on. And I got to a point where I said, all right, I am definitely awake. This definitely is reality. I got to that very clear point in my consciousness. And then there were other animals around too. I don't know if it was deer or what, but there was a whole lot of activity going on. Then in the morning, I went over to the fire pit that had some sand around it. I could not find a hoof print to save my life. And I should have been able to find one in the sense that I saw where the moose went up and he lowered down and he sniffed my fire and then they kept going. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, I didn't have the evidence afterwards, but I know that I reached the conclusion, this is reality, that just happened. And I was awake for a solid hour after that. So it's not like I was, just fading in and out of dreamland. So that will always stand out as a mysterious, mystical encounter that I had with moose. And it was the first encounter with moose on this trip. I encountered another moose in Utah that we'll get to eventually. Had another lucid dreaming experience on this trip, which was a little bit concerning, where I pitched a tent and I slept in it, and it was early in the daytime. I must have gone to sleep at 5 o'clock. It was still light, and I think it was just a nap. But I laid down and I napped, and I had a lucid dream. And I woke up in my tent exactly where I slept, exactly in the environment that I put my tent up in. And I woke up to someone running up to my tent and jumping down. And I forget the word that they said, but it was either danger or lookout or something along those lines. And so I woke up, that happened, and then I woke up after that person did that. So had the reoccurring, wake up in the same exact spot. One of them, I woke up inside a dream and that happened. And then I woke up in reality. And yet again, my senses are completely heightened. And I'm looking around like, all right, is something about to go down? Is that a premonition? And I actually am very surprised at myself because I didn't leave or move or anything. I stayed there almost because I was curious to see, is that a premonition? Is something going to happen? And I was certainly on high alert and I waited it out, but nothing ever happened. But that was probably the most intense or the most fearful or the most on edge that I was on the entire trip. So if you're interested in lucid dreaming, I got an intro to lucid dreaming video on the YouTube channel. A lot of you have already checked that out. And we'll check off where we're going next. I believe Utah. Great spot. See you then.